Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Plant Healthcare PLC investor presentation. Throughout this presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Simply type your question and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and you'll be notified once they're ready for your review. I'd also like to remind you this presentation is being recorded. I'd now like to submit the following poll before we begin. And I'd like to hand you over to Chris Richards, CEO, and Jeff Tweedy, COO of Plant Healthcare PLC. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Richards, delighted to be with you today. Just a quick introduction of myself. I've been in agriculture for many years, 20 years in a company which is today called Syngenta. It was called ICI when I joined it. And then in 2003, I was headhunted to be CEO of a private equity-backed company based in Japan called Arista Life Science. And I spent the next decade or so restructuring that company. Along the way, we sold it to Permira in London for $2.4 billion, made nearly 6 times return for the first private equity owners. And I stayed on initially as CEO, then as chairman of Arista until Permira sold it to a New York SPAC in 2015 for $3.5 billion. So I've been involved with Plant Healthcare now since the tail end of 2012. It's been, in some ways, a long and interesting road, and we're really excited to be presenting to you today a Plant Healthcare which is really at a very exciting inflection point. Jeff, please say hi.
Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon. Jeff Tweedy, COO. I have been with Plant Healthcare just over 3 years, 2 years in this role. Prior to joining Plant Healthcare, I had spent 9 years with Arista Life Science as well in various, I ran the commercial organization in North America, technical development and regulatory management roles. And prior to coming to Arista, I spent 11 plus years with Syngenta Legacy Zeneca in technical and marketing roles. I've been in the business around 30 years, spent most of it on the crop protection, but the last 10 to 12 have been on the biological side. And look forward to taking your questions today.
Great. Thanks very much, Jeff. So let's get into it, everybody. We're going to take our videos off so that you don't have to look at us, and you can look at the slides here. So if we get into the first slide, the executive summary. Sorry, just changing the slides. There we go. Plant Healthcare is all about sustainable agriculture. And as many of you know, I'm sure agriculture is changing dramatically with much pressure from every angle for agriculture to become more sustainable. And that is driving global demand for what we call biological solutions of more than 16% a year. Biological solutions are integral to sustainable agriculture, and think of that as a proxy for growth in sustainable agriculture. That is where Plant Healthcare plays. And our technology is not only sustainable, it's also cost effective. Frankly, it's not enough just to have a sustainable technology if you're not also helping farmers to feed the world. Now, we could have chosen with Plant Healthcare to focus on organic growers, and we decided not to for a very simple reason. One is that on a global basis, organic agriculture is only about 5% of food production. 95% is not organic. And the challenge of making that 95% more sustainable is, for me, a greater challenge for the world than just growing organic agriculture. So we would like you to think about Plant Healthcare in 2 buckets. The first one is our existing commercial business, and then the second is our really exciting new technology, Pretech. Now, the existing commercial business, we're really very excited about the way that is developing. In 2020, for the first time, our commercial business was both profitable and cash generative. If it were a standalone business, we would now be a profitable business. So we're selling proven products with strong gross margins, greater than 70%, our core product, Harp and Alpha Beta. And what's really important is that after a lot of work, which Jeff Tweedy will tell you about, Harpin alpha beta is now growing rapidly in our core markets. So in-market sales in our 3 core markets, 2 in the US and 1 in Brazil, doubled in 2020, which is a great indicator of forward growth of our commercial business. In addition to our commercial business, we're really excited about PreTech. Now, we call PreTech vaccines for plants because that's what they do. They help plants be healthier. If our products touch the leaf of the plant, or in some cases the seed of the plant when the plant germinates, the whole plant responds. It's what we call a systemic hypersensitivity response. The whole plant responds. It's just like taking a vaccination. Now, in these days of COVID-19, many of you, I'm sure, like me, have had your first vaccination, and we're really excited about vaccines. We actually came up with this vaccines for plants slogan before COVID hit, but it's very redolent in today's market. So we're making plants healthier. And what that means is that farmers get more yield and better quality crops. Now, PreTech peptides compared with Harpin are an order of magnitude more exciting. They're lower cost, they're more potent, they're greater stability, and easier to use. They deliver tremendous benefits to growers. And we've invested more than $20 million since 2012 in PreTech, in this potentially disruptive technology. We're targeting very large markets with a value of greater than $5 billion. And we are launching our very first product after 8 years of work later this year in Brazil, and we'll tell you more about that. So for these reasons, we are confident that plant healthcare is now at an inflection point. So we are planning to accelerate the growth of this company. Now, as many of you may know, we successfully raised $9.8 million last week. And that is really important for us, that we've now got funding to deliver our accelerated growth plans. Now, that fundraise was heavily oversubscribed, and it has resulted in a much better balance in the shareholder register, so that we are less dependent, as we were previously, on 2 very, very large shareholders. We believe that will be in the interest of all shareholders going forward, and should support liquidity in the stock, which has been an issue for investors in the past. Now, what are we going to do with that money? We're essentially going to accelerate PreTech. We'll make sure these vaccines for plants are rolled out as widely as we can. And we'll tell you more about this in a minute, but we're planning our first launch in Brazil later this year. We've now named that plant Saori, and I look forward to telling you about that. But with many other products in the pipeline, we have a series of US launches planned for 2022, 23, and a rich pipeline of blockbuster products. And that's how we're going to invest the bulk of the money. We also want to enter the market in Europe with PreTech, and Europe is the largest market in the world for sustainable agriculture, and up to now we've not had the resources to start developing PreTech in that market. So we're going to bring the benefit of these products to the European market. And of course, it also helps us to strengthen our balance sheet. So I'd like to move on quickly, and I shall share this slide in a minute with Jeff Tweedy, who'll take it from here for the next few slides. Many of you are familiar with plant healthcare for quite a long time. And you're quite within your rights to say, hey, Chris, we've heard the story of plant healthcare, but actually you've not been showing significant revenue growth in the past. What's different now? Well, there's a lot that's different. And in order to understand that, I'd like to take you back with our commercial business to when I first joined the business right at the end of 2012. Now, at that time, plant healthcare had a series of businesses, and we decided to divest non-performing units so that we could focus on Harpin alpha beta, which is the product that I joined the company in order to promote and develop. We decided to keep the Mexican business. We'll not say much about Mexico in this presentation, but it's a significant business for us, and we retained it because it's profitable and generates cash, and they sell a decent amount of Harpin, Alpha Beta in Mexico, as well as third-party products. But then when we started to look back in 2013-14 at Harpin, Alpha Beta, it became clear to us that the product was not positioned correctly in the market. And so the first thing we had to do was reposition Harpin, decide which are the most promising markets for that product. How are we going to ramp up sales in those markets? And that takes time. In agriculture, it really takes time. If you do a trial, let's say, in oranges in Spain, and you don't quite get the application rate right, it's 12 months before you can repeat that trial. So that's why it took us a long time to get the product repositioned. But as we got more confident, we started to target the most promising markets, and that's when we made arguably the best decision we've made in a long time, and we hired Jeff Tweedy. Jeff, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. As Chris mentioned, one of the key things that we did was really work on the repositioning of the product. It had been positioned to do everything on every crop, and that's just not how it works. From there, we started working with distributors, and most of the distributors, customers that we had were small distributors. And it was good. They were great at positioning, but they were very limited in their market access. So that really limited what markets we could get into. So we wanted to work with larger distributors, focus on these larger markets, and really position the product correctly. And that's where things really started to change. So in 2018, we launched Harpin Alpha Beta in Brazil and sugarcane. We have a very large cooperative in São Paulo State that we work with, Copacabana. They're our exclusive distributor. In addition to that, we launched a U.S. product on corn with the second largest distributor in the U.S. And in 2019, we expanded our distribution into specialty crops. We were working with a very small distributor in the northwest part of the U.S. They did a good job, but they were limited in who they could access. And that's when we decided to move to Wilbur Ellis. They're the fourth largest distributor in the U.S., but very focused on specialty crops and been a very good partner. So that really changed the dynamic, changed the markets that we could get into. As Chris mentioned, our in-market sales in 2020 doubled on ground sales, which reduced our inventory market that distributors have by $1 million. Now that didn't necessarily result in double sales for us, but what it did is bring those levels down. They're in a very good spot today. And with the doubling of the use, growers are seeing the benefits of the Harpin and the correct positioning. We maintain close relationships with these distributors, and one of the values of that is we have access to their inventory. We have access to their sales on a monthly basis. So that really helps out our business, plan our purchasing, production, and forecasting, and helps us manage working capital. That's really important. We did achieve EBITDA and cash positive of the commercial business this year for the first time. And our plans, we received a registration for Harpin in California, which is the largest specialty market. And our plans are to launch that in 2020. In fact, those launches are going on right now and going very well. So it's kind of where we've been, where we headed. We really want to expand our relationship with Wilbur Ellis to take Harpin Alpha Beta into different mixtures of their products. They have a large proprietary line, which we're part of, and they want to create different mixtures to get into to expand the market access. We want to work on a Generation 2 product for corn with our partner there and really build on the success that we're having. And we want to expand into South America. Today, we're focused on sugarcane. It's roughly 8.5 million hectares, but we would like to move into coffee. We see really good benefits in coffee and yield and quality of the Arabica. And so the plan will be to enter those markets in the coming years. And then Europe. Europe is a small market for us today, but the largest market for the biologicals. And we want to expand on that and kind of build the distribution strategy that we have in the other parts of the world. Now, Europe is more fragmented, but we do have relationships with some large distributors in certain countries that we believe will give us the kind of the framework for that. And lastly is to generate consistent cash and profit for this business and grow above the market growth rates. We're growing at 16% a year. We want to grow beyond that. I'll touch the next couple of slides just on the commercial business. First one is our sugarcane business. As I mentioned, we had a really good on ground. We tripled sales, grew 3x in 2020. So if you look at the bottom right, there's a chart there. We treated almost 400 or 43,000 hectares. That's approaching 1% market share in the state of Sao Paulo. There's roughly 5 million hectares in that state. So very large market. And what's driving that is yield increase. Growers are seeing an average of 23% yield increase with a return on investment of about 14 times. So on average, we sell to a grower, our average selling price is $18 a hectare, and our gross margin is above 70% on that. So we make a nice margin. This is a very attractive market. And we believe that if we can get on a 10% share of this market, it's a $15 million opportunity for our business. If you look to the right of the slide, there is a grower who gave us a testimonial. And these are some pictures from his field. The gentleman holding the 2 sugarcane stalks, one on the left is untreated, and you can see the harpin treated on the right. That sugarcane is almost 4 meters tall. So visually, a significant difference. We've got a great adoption, as I mentioned. We're approaching 1% market share. The last thing I'd say about this market is they have long payment terms. Crops are anywhere from a year to 18 months before they harvest. And so we've got factoring in place to really help us with our cash flows. And that's an important piece to have in the Brazilian market. If you don't have factoring to help you with cash flow, it can be a challenging business to be in. If we turn to the next slide, I'll just finish on a couple more commercial markets in the U.S. U.S. corn is one of the largest markets in the world. We grew our own ground sales last year almost 2x. Bar chart to the right shows that we treated almost 650,000 acres. And the reason is it produces stronger corn. The picture at the bottom is an untreated versus a treated with the harpin alpha beta. It goes on as a seed treatment. It costs the grower roughly $3 per acre. And our gross margin on that, we make around 70% on those treated, plus 70% on these acres. And this corn is under severe stress. And this is from this past summer. It was hot, it was dry, and you can see that the harpin alpha beta treated corn grew right through it, which had resulted in higher yields. We see an average of 3 to 5%. This is, as we mentioned, a second largest distributor. A 1% share of this market would be a $5 million opportunity. I think this year we're going to have a larger corn crop than we've ever seen, and commodity prices are as high as they've been in a while. Growers are going to spend money, so we're really excited about the opportunities presents itself this coming year. As the last crop I want to mention is specialty crops. This is with Wilbur Ellis. They're about a $3.4 billion distributor. The specialty crop market has $1 billion worth of inputs in the West Coast, Upper Midwest, and East Coast. We believe that if we were to get 1% of this market share, it would be a $10 million opportunity for us. And we're going to do that through driving product adoption on many crops. As I mentioned, we launched in California this year for the first time. Grapes and almonds will be the first crops. And then as we generate more data, we will add additional crops to that label. We also want to grow through strong product mixtures. Wilbur Ellis has a very large product line, and we're looking at a number of combinations to bring in the market in the coming years. And we want to expand to the East Coast. We really have no presence on the East Coast. Wilbur is a strong distributor there today. And we believe that these products, they fit those crops. They're very similar crops, and that we'll see expanded growth there. So in summary, we've really changed this business. We've gone from working small distributors, limited crops, to very large market access as we've grown the business. It is now cash positive, EBITDA positive, and we are looking for significant growth in the coming years in these crops, which is really going, these customers as well, that will give us the platform to really bring in the new technology, which Chris is going to talk about now. And Chris, I'll turn it back to you.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. So that's a really good summary of where we are with the commercial business. What I'd like to do now, everybody, is talk a little bit more about PreTech, our vaccines for plants. So first of all, what is PreTech? So that stands for Plant Response Elicited Technology. It's derived from naturally occurring proteins that switch on natural defense and growth systems. So we just had a great question come in from from Benjamin C. on the webinar just now, saying, is Harbin or is Pretec a GM technology, and would it be subject to those restrictions? And the answer is absolutely not. We're not changing the genome of the plant. We're not changing the genetic makeup of the plant. We're switching the plant on, so we don't have to worry about that at all. It is very, think of it as just turning on the immune system of the plant. So it is, again, a big advance from Harbin. Harbin alpha beta is a great product, but these products are more powerful, they're more stable, they're cheaper to make. And very critically, there's a whole pipeline of differentiated Pretec products. We can customize products to particular uses. So they are tailored, we can segment and differentiate in the market, and that's really, really critically important. So what the farmer sees is better treatment of pests like nematodes and diseases, better resistance to stress like drought. And they, as a result, they see greater crop yield and quality. What the world sees is excellent ESG credentials. The Environmental Protection Agency, the US, classifies these products as low toxicity and no residues. And that's really, really important these days, particularly for farmers growing fruits and vegetables. You don't want residues of anything on the crop you sell in the supermarket. Very importantly, from our point of view, we have designed Pretec from the beginning to be compatible with mainstream agricultural practices, as I said earlier, to help mainstream farmers be more sustainable. One of the benefits of this is that we get fast-track registration compared with conventional agricultural chemicals. Now, we got registration for Saori in Brazil in 13 months. We expected it might take 2 or 3 years. If it were an agrochemical, it would take 6 or 7 years. The Brazilian authorities want to bring forward this new kind of effective, sustainable product. So we get a much more certain, cheaper, quicker registration for our products. But I want to try and bring Pretec to life for you by talking a little bit about the launch of Saori, which is our very first product. It's based on a product which up to now we've called PHC 279. Now, our target in this case is soybeans in Brazil. There are 38 million hectares of soybeans in Brazil. Brazil is the world's largest producer of soy. And to demonstrate what one of the benefits of this product, from the farmer's point of view, he's already using various seed treatments. And this is just another seed treatment. When he's taking a seed and treating it before planting, he just adds a bit of Saori on top. So for the mainstream farmer, it's really easy to use. And what we're showing is an increased yield for the farmer. And trials done over the last 2 years have shown a very significant yield worth about $85 a hectare, giving a good return on investment. But I want to focus for a moment on the trials that we're doing this year. Now, soy in Brazil, you plant end of September, October, November, December, depending where you are in Brazil, and then you harvest from about now onwards. So we put trials in the ground in the current soy crop. And then we go around and we do what's called an early reheat. We have a field tour, we all go around, and we look at how the crop is progressing. And if you look at the photographs on the bottom right of this slide here, they're a little small, but I think you can pick it up well, that these were taken last month on one of these field tours in Brazil. The photograph on the left-hand side there has been treated in the conventional way. The grower has taken his soy seed, he's put on all the normal chemicals he does, and he's planted it in the ground, and up it comes as a good, healthy soy crop. The photograph on the right-hand side here, he's done exactly the same thing, the same seed, same chemicals. He's just added Saori on top. Now, the first thing you can immediately see is the plants are healthier, they're more vigorous, there's more plant there. You can't see very much soil. The canopy is closing. Now, farmers like that because they say, hey, this bigger crop is more likely to give me a high yield, particularly if there's any stress in the crop, if it doesn't rain at the right time, or indeed there's too much rain or whatever. So I'm feeling good about that. It's more likely to give me a good crop. So he feels great about Saori. But if you then look, which you can't see on the photographs in more detail, our technical guys and the government officials we're working with, the universities we're working with, if you look in more detail, the soy plants treated with Saori have no disease. The soy plants not treated with Saori, in many cases, had quite a lot of disease. Now, this is enormously exciting. Firstly, from the farmer's point of view, Brazilian farmers spend $2.5 billion a year on fungicides to control disease. It can be a devastating attack. I've seen personally fields in Brazil where you harvest nothing because disease has wiped out the crop. So they're spending a lot of money on this. If they can reduce the amount of fungicide they use, this has a huge economic benefit for the grower. But also, it has a very substantial benefit for the planet because fungicides are toxic agricultural chemicals. I know quite a lot about them. I spent 30 years selling them. They do what it says on the tin, but they are toxic products. If we can get people using Saori more and chemicals less, that is a big gain for sustainability. So I tell you that story because this is the very first use of pre-tech peptides, our vaccines for plants, and we'll be launching that product later this year in Brazil. Now, our next step with Saori is to find and nominate the right distributor for this product. We could sell directly to distributors in Brazil, but whereas Jeff Tweedy can sell to 90% of fruits and vegetables in the US through one distributor, Wilbur Ellis, in Brazil, the market is much more fragmented, and we'd have to sell to 20 or 25 distributors, which would be challenging for a little company like us, particularly when you take into account accounts receivables risks. So we will probably nominate one national, possibly two national distributors, and we're in the process of evaluating that. We've not signed contracts yet, but I can tell you that 5 major national companies are currently testing Saori in the current soy crop. So I think we've got a very good probability of launching with a strong distributor this year in Brazil. Last point, that I would like to emphasize that you should not expect multiple $million-dollar sales of Saori this year in Brazil. For a start, the registration came earlier than we expected, and we're having to supply from our pilot plant so that we are limited in quantity, frankly. Secondly, you saw from what Jeff Tweedy was talking about in sugarcane and corn, the product adoption in these markets is not very fast. This is disruptive technology. This is a revolution in agriculture. Farmers want to test it, try it out. So our aim this year is to sell a fairly limited quantity, but to get it tested by as many early adopting leading soy growers as we can, which should form a good basis for the future. And we believe that we should be selling double-digit millions of Saori dollars of Saori in 3 to 5 years' time. So that's where we are with Saori. But if you go on to the next slide here, Saori is only the first of a bunch of products from the pre-tech pipeline. We have a very strong pipeline here. Now, the next launch out of the blocks is likely to be in the US and probably PHC 279. Now, we were very fortunate to sign a joint development agreement with Wilbur Ellis, that very powerful distributor for fruits and vegetables in the US. And we are working actively with them to do trials of PHC 279 in fruits and vegetables in the US. And we anticipate that we will launch multiple products through Wilbur Ellis when we get registration. We have applied for registration with the Environmental Protection Agency in the US, and we expect to get that registration in the middle of 2022. Now, before our fundraise, that was probably about as far as we could go. Now that we have an extra $9.8 million in the bank, we are accelerating the bottom half of this chart. PHC 404, which is a completely different product. We're looking at that in the US with Wilbur Ellis. PHC 949 is a very, very exciting product, which is specifically targeted at soil pests called nematodes. And we're looking at that in the US with Wilbur Ellis for a bunch of different crops. We're also looking at that product in South America with a large and strong partner. So we anticipate that we will apply for registration of PHC 949 in the middle of this year. It takes 18 months to get that registered. So we could anticipate first sales in 2023 of PHC 949 in the States. And shortly thereafter in Brazil and other countries of South America. But as I said earlier, the big opportunity for us, which we have not previously been addressing, is Europe. And I want to spend a couple more minutes on Europe. But the key point from this pipeline chart is that we're targeting very, very large markets, which today are worth more than $5 billion. So just a few words on Europe, if I may. So first of all, Europe is a very large market for sustainable agriculture. If you look at the pie chart on the top left, almost half the biologicals market is in Europe. And as I said at the beginning, that's a good proxy for the market for sustainable agriculture. If you look at the pie chart on the bottom left, we only have 18% of our global sales in Europe. We are underweight in Europe. So we see Europe as being a big opportunity for us, which we have not been able to address before. Of course, Europe is not like the States. It's much more fragmented, and regulation in Europe is generally speaking more complex. So we are planning to engage with, we're already engaging in some areas with large partners and distributors. We would like to seek deals for licenses or joint development agreements, like the one we already have with Wilbur Ellis in the US. But they will be very largely in Europe national rather than across Europe, because distribution for agriculture is very largely national within Europe. But we're also looking at another angle here, which is that as we study Europe more, we find there are very large numbers of small companies in the area of sustainable agriculture, biological products within Europe. Many of them are no bigger than we are. And as we engage with them, we find that none of these have competing technology, and many of them have complementary technology. And then when we talk to them, it's really interesting. A lot of them say, hey, we wish we could have the success in the US, Mexico, Brazil that plant healthcare has. So there's really good complementarity here. So we're looking into the idea of potentially alliances, joint ventures, or possibly even accretive M&A as a way of accelerating our entry into Europe. So early days yet, but I think there's some really exciting things we will be doing in Europe. Now, our final slide here is our milestones, how we'd like you to measure us going forward. And I'd like Jeff to start off with the commercial ones, please.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, our milestones going forward are really pretty simple on the commercial side. We've got to continue to deliver the product adoption in these three core markets that we just mentioned. We had a great on ground in 2020, and we're off to a really good start in 2021. So those are really important. We want to sign up a new major significant distributor in Europe. As I mentioned, it's a much more fragmented market, but there are some partners out there that we're working with today. So we want to complete that. We want to continue to deliver the revenue growth in this sector above 16%, and then consistent in cash performance. We really want to fund our R&D habit. And so as we accelerate the growth in these markets, delivering cash to bring back into the business to fund the R&D efforts going forward.
Thanks, Jeff. So, thanks, appreciate that. So in pre-tech, watch over the coming months when we appoint the distributor for Sauri in Brazil, and we go forward to launch the product in third quarter this year. Also watch we'll make announcements about submitting the PHC 949 application to the EPA in the middle of this year. And the middle of next year, we expect the registration of PHC 279 in the US. We will progress our joint development agreement with Wilbur Ellis, provide more information about that over time, and we will pursue further joint development agreements for PreTech. And most importantly, we'll be telling the market about how we plan to move forward with PreTech development in Europe. And on the group side, clearly for PreTech, we are supplying the launch of Sauri from our pilot plant at the moment, which is at Penn State University. But we're also working to appoint a long-term toll manufacturer for PHC 279 and other PreTech peptides. And we expect to make an announcement about that shortly. For the avoidance of doubt, we are not going to be spending any of the $9.8 million on building a production plant. I don't believe in owning metal. There are some very, very competent toll manufacturers around the world, and we're down to a short list of 2 toll manufacturers for that purpose. We also want to strengthen, however, our ability to defend our intellectual property and make new and interesting formulations of PreTech peptides over time. And finally, a really important point here. We need to drive towards group cash positive. In 2020, we burned $2.7 million of cash, compared with 4.8 in 2019. We will burn more cash in 2021 than 2020 because we're ramping up spend on PreTech. However, it is our resolve to make this company profitable within the resources that we now have, and we are targeting making this company cash positive as quickly as we reasonably can, while maximizing the value of the PreTech platform. So, Paul, if I could hand you back the slides we plan to go through. We've got a couple of slides in the appendix, which will be available when the presentation is put online. But we're going to pause at that point, Paul.
Fantastic. Chris, Jeff, thank you very much indeed for the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, do please continue to submit your questions using the Q&A tab situated in the top right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Chris and Jeff take a few moments to review those investor questions that have already been submitted, I'd like to remind you that recording this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard on the Investor Meet Company platform. I'd also like to remind you that your feedback is important to the company, and immediately after the presentation is ended, you'll be redirected to the opportunity to provide feedback in order the company can better understand your views and expectations. Chris, perhaps before we go on to the questions submitted during the event, we have had a pre-submitted question that has come through. If you could just address this. The pre-submitted question is asking why retail investors didn't have the opportunity to participate in the recent fundraise.
Yeah, that's a really great question, and in fact, Roger F. has just raised it online as well. Now, I recognize the disappointment. We anticipated giving retail investors the opportunity, but in practice, raising capital is complicated, and there's lots of competition out there. One of our strategic objectives was to diversify the shareholder register. Many of you, I think, know that we had 2 shareholders who represented 53% of Plant Healthcare shares. And that was a real weakness for us. Amongst other things, it tended to limit liquidity in the stock. And we have achieved that dilution. Those 2 shareholders kindly agreed. They were very supportive of the raise, but they kindly agreed to step back on this occasion. So they now represent a significantly smaller proportion, and we brought in some very high quality new institutions. And we do see this as in the best interest of all shareholders over the medium term. So thank you for that question, but that's how we would answer. Paul, if I may, I'd like to go on and answer some of the other questions, and I'll get Jeff to answer some of those as well.
Thanks, Chris. If you wouldn't mind just reading them out as well, that'll be fantastic. Thank you.
I will indeed. My video feed seems to have ceased, at least on my side, which may give people the benefit of not having to look at my face. So, hey, we'll press ahead. So the first question here that I'm going to take is from Douglas P., who says, Brazil is in the middle of a devastating COVID outbreak. How much of an impact is the outbreak expected to have on the rollout of PHC 279? Now, I'm going to suggest that, Jeff, you take that question. You manage the team in Brazil. Would you like to take that one?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, it's a great question. You know, first thing I would say is that we have very strict protocols and safety measures in place for all our employees, and Brazil is no different. And they've been adhering to those. We've had around 30 locations where we had trials out this year, where we've had companies, potential partners come and visit, going through those protocols. We visited 27 of those. 3 we were not able to visit because of the COVID. But what we've done is we've been able to have virtual visits. We get the cooperators on the phone with these companies and go through the results, but also share with them. And I think that as we move forward, you know, everyone's adapting to COVID. We follow pretty strict protocols, but I don't believe it'll be a significant impact on our rollout. We're still able to engage with potential partners in this, and I think everybody's learning to adapt in this new environment with using video. And sometimes it's actually more efficient. So, but we did have good participation in the trial work that we had with excellent results. So we feel confident that it'll be limited impact on our rollout.
Thanks for that, Jeff. There's another question come in from Roger F., also relating to Saori in Brazil. Do I understand that sales of 279 Saori in Brazil soya takes place in the early stages of the growing cycle? Jeff, do you want to pick that one up?
Yep, very, very good question, Roger. And the Saori, which goes on as a seed treatment. So it will be applied, typically the seeds will be treated between August and October, depending on the state in Brazil the soybeans are going in. So it goes on as seed treatment prior to planting, and then the soybeans are planted into the crop. Once they emerge, or is planted into the soil, once they emerge, they absorb the Saori, and that's where you really turn on the mechanism plant. So it is a seed treatment, which is a very good. We love it. It's a really nice place to be, and we'll be the first product out there, first biological that's offering control of Asian soy rust as a seed treatment.
Jeff, there's another one here which I'm going to ask you to answer. I will answer some questions in a minute, but these seem to be yours. This one here from Roger F. Do I understand that eventually Brazil's sugarcane will be serviced by 279 rather than Harpin?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and we actually started working on PHC 279 in sugarcane last year. Really for disease control, they have one disease that seems to be particularly a problem in sugarcane, which is called orange rust. And there's not a lot of good alternatives for that. So we've had some initial testing underway last year. It showed promise, and so we have expanded that testing this year into sugarcane to expand the results. But we also want to look at some different varieties. Some varieties are more susceptible than others. They are higher yielders, and that's why there's a level of interest. So we'll expand that. I would guess it'll be another year before we have full results from that, but there's definitely strong interest in pursuing PHC 279 in sugarcane.
And final one, I'm going to bounce straight to you for the time being, Jeff, is from John H. Does the effect of Saori persist if not used for the following crop, i.e., is there a reduction in background disease?
I think if your question is background disease the following year, I don't know that. What we do know from the work that we've done this year with Saori, this is the first year that we've looked at other diseases besides the Asian soy rust. So there are late season diseases that show up in the soybean crop in Brazil. And our results have been very good on those late season diseases, which we're excited about. We will not be able to add them to the label or the recommendation the first year because we have to generate a certain number of trials. submit the data from those trials into the Brazilian agencies and then receive approval. But what I can say is we were extremely excited, and our cooperators were excited about the additional disease control that we saw late season in the soybean crop, but I wouldn't expect it to carry to the next year.
Thanks, Jeff. And here's a couple which I'll take myself, both from Andrew C. Andrew says, first, on a technical level, could you tell us a little about why the pre-tech molecules are more potent than harpin alpha beta? And secondly, do you think there could be much of a long-term threat to plant healthcare's products and genome editing techniques, or do you think the two approaches could coexist side by side since PHC technology looks so strong? Well, Andrew, on a technical level, without going too deep, the original discovery in Cornell University by the guy who's still our chief science officer, Dr. Jean-Min Wei, was that there are certain bacteria and fungi which secrete proteins which cause this immune response in plants. And so harpin alpha beta is a recombinant protein which is inspired by 6 different natural proteins, and they're big molecules of 440 odd amino acids, and that makes them quite unstable, quite difficult. You know, we have to be very careful they don't break down too quickly. And the differences with the pre-tech molecules are what we call peptides, very small molecules by comparison. They're inspired by the same technology. But they're only 20 to 40 amino acids long, and they're much more stable. Per gram, they're much more potent because we've only got the very active piece. They are cheaper to make because they're very small. And we've been able to play tunes with the amino acids so that we can produce this great range of products. We've talked about PHC 279, 949, 404. There's actually a bunch more that we plan to look at in addition. So that's why they're more potent. And in genome editing, actually for 4 years, I was a non-executive director of a US gene editing company called Phoebus. Gene editing has huge potential, although it's very restricted in Europe because it's from a regulatory point of view, people generally put it in the same bucket as GMOs, although that's technically speaking not quite fair. But that's politics for you. But in essence, they're targeting mainly different effects. So I think there's definitely room to coexist, and farmers need as many new technologies as they can right now. So I certainly think there's lots of room to coexist. We have the advantage that we're not GM, so I think we will coexist. So if I could go on then, I'm delighted by the number of questions going in, and I hope I'm trying to answer them in a vaguely coherent manner, but as they come in, I may lose the thread here. So Benjamin C. we're asking, is Bayer Monsanto still in agreement to commercialize harpin alpha-based technology? And the answer is, with harpin alpha beta, no. That is one of the uses that we thought back in 2009, 10, I think, could be really exciting for harpin alpha beta. It turned out to be not successful for a series of commercial as well as technical reasons, so we don't have that. We do, however, have various cooperation agreements with all of the major agrochemical companies. I'm not permitted to today to tell you which ones, but it is perfectly feasible that it would include Bayer Monsanto. I'm sorry to be a little bit elusive on the answer to that question. There's another really nice technical one, which I'm going to ask Jeff to answer, from Douglas P. Are you exploring opportunities in treating overwintering crops to help rejuvenate soils in the American West? Jeff?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm not sure that that's a crop that we've looked at in great demand. There has been interest in looking at Grass crops, mainly in the West, it would be grass that's grown for seed. It's not an overwintering crop, as you would think. It's like a cover crop. But there has been interest in grass for seed, and I think our partner, Wilbur Ellis, is exploring some of that up in the Oregon area. And there's some limited testing that's going on today. But it would be an interesting thing to look at, for sure.
Thanks. And I'll take one more technical question, then I'll go to some of the more capital markets related questions. David L. asks, who do you see as your main competitors? Who are the other major players in your space? Well, that's a really, really interesting question, because there's a lot of technologies out there that make some claims similar to ours. So, for example, if you look at the Saori in Brazil, that's why when I tell the story there, I talk about the early effects on vigor, plant coming up thicker, more robust, and then the disease. There are other products out there that claim to stimulate plants. I mean, from advanced fertilizers to seaweed extracts to all sorts of things. What I don't believe any of those do is have this really exciting vaccination effect on disease. Frankly, we have not seen anyone come out with that kind of effect. It is revolutionary. Now, if you go to the specific area of peptides in agriculture, we believe that we've now captured the majority, at least, of the valuable intellectual property in this area. Our first patents, and we've filed more than 40 patents already. Our first patents have already been granted by the US Patent Office with very broad claims. There are 2 or 3 other companies out there exploring the area of peptides, but we believe we have a significant competitive lead. Firstly, with our intellectual property. Secondly, that our products have been designed from the get-go to fit into mainstream agriculture, and they're not only highly differentiated and highly potent, but also very cheap to make. And there are a lot of other peptides out there which are not so cheap to make. And that's really, really important. You know, as Jeff was talking about with half and alpha beta, farmers only have to invest $3 an acre. And that is really, really helps adoption. Now, it's $18 a hectare in cane. It's more, but the effect is great. So we believe we're a highly cost-effective technology. Now, we track competition very carefully, and as and when I'm wrong, we'll find out. But that's our current view. If I could go then to Colin G. Colin says, it seems that the market is very large. Are you being too cautious in only raising 9.8 million? Isn't this limiting? I would not expect a business like this to be cash positive anytime soon. Again, quite cautious. Well, I've been part of very large companies which can spend money without limit. And this is something that Jeff and I talk about a lot. We are very mean with shareholders' money in plant healthcare because we want to make absolutely sure that we make every dime count. And yeah, if we raise more money, we could probably spend it. But we feel it is our responsibility to shareholders to drive this company to cash positive in a reasonable and visible timescale. So we will dose that in. We're planning to take our spend on pre-tech from around $2.7 million last year to approximately double in 2022. Now that will push cash break-even out by 12 to 24 months, but it will also bring forward revenue, both from the existing commercial business and from early sales of pre-tech. So we really feel we need to stand on our own 2 feet, Colin, and start to generate profits to shareholders. So I think we're getting close to the end of the time here, but Albert F. Asking, are you investigating a dual listing? And at this point, Albert, we are not. However, there are options for getting more access to the North American investors. For example, an OTC listing, which many quite large companies, European companies, are now doing, and we're actively looking at that. And I think it's relevant to the audience today that the reason we're reaching out more to retail investors is to get more interest in plant healthcare, clearly, not only through our very good colleagues here in Investor Meet Company, but also through other platforms as well, whom I think Paul would not thank me for mentioning on this webinar. But we are using other platforms as well to reach out to retail investors, and some of those have a good outreach into the US. And we all look at the valuation of ag biotech stocks in North America, and we feel that by American standards, we are significantly undervalued. So by tapping into North American investors, we would hope over time to drive the market capitalization of plant healthcare to levels that are more commensurate with the value of the company. John L. was asking, what price was the new capital? Well, it was priced in the end at 14 pence, which I think was pretty good. Those of you who've held this stock for a while will know that we spent much of last year with a share price around 8 pence. As we started to do more outreach to investors and tell the story better, I think people, particularly through Investor Meet Company, I think people began to understand the story better, so that when we got registration in Brazil just at the turn of the year, that helped to lift the share price. And the price was around 16 pence when we did the fundraise. And right now, checking right before this, that's about where we are today. So in my view, the company, going back to the comment I was making earlier, we should be driving the share price and the market capitalization very significantly above that. And it's probably relevant in that context to mention that Jeff and I and the other executives in the team are highly leveraged with options and LTIPs, the majority of which are only start to be in the money at the share price of 15 pence. So we are very closely aligned to investors who come into the stock at the current price. So, Paul, I'm conscious that we've just about got to the end of our time. Should we pull stumps, as an English?
Yeah, I was going to say, you've pretty much covered, Chris, Jeff, thank you. I think you have pretty much addressed all those questions you can from investors. And of course, you can review any further questions that are submitted, and we'll publish answers to those on the Investor Meet Company platform. Chris, perhaps I could just ask you just for a final couple of words just to close off the meeting before we redirect investors, just to give you a little bit of feedback.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you, everybody, for your attention today. It's been a full hour. We really think that plant healthcare is now at an inflection point with our commercial business profitable, cash generative, with revenue growth accelerating, with pre-test vaccines for plants due to take off after our $20 million investment over the last 8 years. So we're very excited with the additional $9.8 million we've raised. We will accelerate those plans, and we look forward to telling you more about how we progress over the coming months. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Chris, Jeff, thank you very much for updating investors today. Can I please ask investors not to close the session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback. If you've accessed the meeting from the website, the feedback page will appear in front of you. If you've accessed this meeting via the link sent to you in the email, you'll simply be asked just to log back in. It takes just a couple of seconds and will be greatly appreciated by the company. On behalf of the management team of Plant Healthcare, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That concludes today's session. Thank you.